Rose was just watching the Royal Knights train when the commander of the entire squad walks up to him and tells him to leave, says he's bothering all knights standing there like a maniac. His maid steps in and says, "Hey, you're talking to a prince." The commander doesn't care, calls him a useless, ugly, bitchless bastard who's interfering with training. But then the commander got a stare from the boy's eyes that he wasn't expecting, an intense and brutal stare that doesn't belong on a 14-year-old. The air gets heavy, the soldiers start walking over to see what's going on. They see the third prince, the one everyone treats like a useless joke, and they relax. But then Kid reaches up and snaps a twig off a branch above him, and he tells the commander his knights are garbage. Their training is trash. The troops aren't being strengthened. They're just being babysat and wasting time. Duds gets offended, obviously, and was about to curse at the boy, but in the blink of an eye, the kid is behind him. Hebel barely gets his sword up in time, and he knows if he hadn't, he'd be dead. He just blocked a killing strike from a stick. The kid smiles, then he lets go of the branch, and the commander's sword goes flying out of his hands, gone, disarmed by a twig, in front of every single soldier under his command. The kid says he's impressed by the commander's lack of skill, couldn't even defend himself against someone useless. Hebel drops to his knees and begs for forgiveness. While his men are frozen, their commander is on the ground groveling in front of the prince nobody respects. Now this dude real name is Baron. He used to be a king, the king of a nation called Sacritia. He fought a war against the kingdom of Kyrus, a war over an artifact called the Axis of Time that could literally rewind history, and Kyrus burned everything to the ground, Baron everything to those goons of Kyrus when he was surrounded by enemy mages alone with nothing left but a sword and one arm. They lasered my poor bro and then he woke up in a soft bed surrounded by servants inside the royal palace of Kyrus, the kingdom that destroyed him. Yeah, bro is inside the empire of the dudes who cooked his crew. He's about to burn this place from inside out and kill every single nigga in sight, cause he's in the body of Callian, the third prince. Problem is that this dude is the weakest, most hated, most pathetic member of the royal family. At least he got this maid that I thought was a girl at first but is just a breedable femboy. Right after bro was eating and chillin' thinking about his new life. But in this house, all three princes eat together by the king's orders. When this dude named Planche who thinks he's on One Piece or some shit with that jacket over shoulder at 7 a.m. walks in. Our boy used to be that dude that just lowered his head, but bro looked dead in the eyes and said, "Yo bitch, what's up?" Planche, being that well-mannered dude he is, suddenly just grabbed a knife and threw at our boy's side femboy to pierce his skull. But bro just caught midair like nothing, walked to his side and told him, "Careful bro, next time it can end in your face." Brother was just stunned. Did I got roasted by the trashiest dude of this place. Now things aren't that smooth because something almost went wrong. When the knife came at him, he nearly used aura on instinct. The reflexes of an aura warrior who'd spent his whole life on a battlefield almost exposed him in a dining room. But then he felt something he didn't expect. A sharp pain in his chest. Not from the knife, from the inside. So he checked, and what he found changed everything. 3 mana circles around his heart. This body isn't just some weak prince, it's a mage's body. 3 circles already formed. That's serious talent, but also almost a curse. Bro spent his whole life grabbing fixed swords and now he has to cast balls, which is a problem. Because every time he tries to use mana, his chest feels like it's being crushed. His body is losing weight rapidly. He can barely run 3 laps around the palace lake without almost collapsing. His nose starts bleeding randomly. The royal tailor, the guy who measures him regularly, says he's getting thinner every time. A body with 3 mana circles, and the royal dragon bloodline blessing should be healing itself constantly. It should be getting stronger, not falling apart. But that's happening because this kid is being poisoned, and it's not a small dose. Whatever's in his system is strong enough that without the dragon bloodline burning through it 24/7, he'd already be dead. This isn't some random assassination attempt. Someone has been poisoning RG day in day out. But who? Bro thinks in the original timeline this boy died at 15. They said he tried to poison the queen and then hanged himself. What if that story was always a lie? Speaking of suspects, it was then that our bro smelled someone coming. Literal dog behavior. This bitch is Celes, the current queen. From the eye color must be his stepmother, and holy shit, she's perfect for that stepson niche with those thick lips. And of course she goes directly to our boy, saying that lately he's looking very grown and healthy. My bro drops a punline on her and says, "I didn't grow much. You'll see how much more I can grow in the future." Yeah, that's the direction I like my stories to go. Words that made the atmosphere turn heavy. The Viscount said he'd barely recognized him since he didn't usually even show his face. He'd definitely become a very tall man. That's when the queen cut him off. Who would have thought? The Viscount really is a lapdog, just like the rumors said. The queen asked why Planche hadn't told her about the horse that doesn't obey him at all. It would have been good if he'd reported it. But Planche said she already knew. Soleil said he'd lost control of the reins, and her son said the horse was useless. He got up and left the table right away, leaving his cursed mother furious. 3 weeks later, it was time for the king's birthday celebration. The king who's basically his wife's doormat, like everything in that palace. The common people are excited about the festivities. Everyone wants to see the princes. While they were getting the kid ready, the tailor got really worried. Blood started running from Killian's nose. All the servants panicked over the sudden nosebleed. The butler asked for compresses to help. The prince said it was nothing, that he'd just been sleeping badly. But since the tailor measures him often, he said the boy had lost even more weight. Killian tried to change the subject and said he'd been exercising too much. That's why he dropped so much weight. As soon as the tailor left, the butler quietly asked if today was the day. No matter what happens, before rumors about Cillian's health spread, he needs to meet Ellen, not Musk. Because of delays in the king's schedule, he'll have to see his sons one by one. The kid doesn't have time to waste and wishes his father would just talk to everyone at once. A private meeting wasn't what he'd been expecting. King Romain is reading documents, and the prince announces himself, but the king acts like he didn't even notice, like he ignored the whole thing. That's unbelievably rude, Kalyan thought, until the king told him to sit. The king asked generic questions and said his son looked fine. Suddenly it all made sense to Kalyan. Now he knows why the king wants to see his sons alone. This way he saves time for real, because he doesn't have to actually talk or ask anything. What a mess of a family. A father who doesn't care. Apathetic brothers, a wonderful place. Plancho's just arrived, and he's already drunk, with zero manners. The person most interested in that meeting is the queen, who has enough power to keep her own husband under her thumb. And in the middle of all these people, someone wants the prince dead. It's time for him to work out who the killer is. Because of the celebration, the prince showed up in front of everyone looking like someone different. His presence is already outshining Prince Plancho, who's just a drunk. The nobles are talking about it, starting rumors. Kalyan finally entered the hall, leaving all those background nobles impressed. The rumors are real. The black-haired, red-eyed prince who looks like Cephanian. He cut his hair, his face is fully visible, and he's even wearing a crimson brooch. It's a quiet statement that he's done hiding. The butler went up to him to ask something. He wanted to know why everyone was staring. He even thought it might be because the prince was dressed so well. Kalyan knows those jewels are drawing attention. It was all the tailor's doing. The butler's family is also from Kairos, but from a small inland town. The prince asked if they'd come to the capital, and the butler said they'd need an invitation. Since the prince got too personal, it looked like the butler was about to snap, but he tried to change the subject. The prince is waiting for the right moment, because there's someone there he wants to meet. He asked if the butler knows why that place is called Siegfried Hall. It was named after the first patriarch of that surname, one of the great heroes. They've been loyal to the royal family for 500 years, defending that territory. In his past life, the prince liked hearing that story, and the person he wants to meet is in the middle of that hall, Duke Siegfried, who looks incredibly powerful. Long, loyal traditions. Those are the kind of people the prince likes. Using a bit of mana, he tried to see if the man was sharp, and he got noticed immediately. The test went exactly as expected. The butler realized the duke was looking at the prince. He's one of the 5 great swordmasters on the continent. For now, the prince will act like nothing happened. In the middle of the hall, the king thanked the guests for coming. Kalyan was already outside with his butler. The kid managed to tame that stubborn horse, discovering it's actually gentle and smart. Now they needed to go to the main gates. Someone had been stopped from entering. Kalyan quickly realized what was going on. It was the person he'd wanted to find. Ellen doesn't have an invitation to the party, so he's being kept out. The guards don't seem to know he's an important mage. Even so, they're blocking him. Ellen thinks guests get treated based on how they look. The prince realizes the mage is doing it on purpose, like he's looking for a reason not to step onto those grounds, already ready to leave. The butler said they can't follow him because they'd be disobeying the king's orders. Kalyan can't lose the mage's trail, so he told his butler to hold the guards back, then spurred his horse toward Ellen. The knights ordered the prince to stop immediately. The king's order forbids anyone from leaving, but the kid jumped past them on his black horse, heading outside the fortress. Now the butler has to do something to stop the guards, because he got a clear order to prevent that from happening. Full of energy, he told the knights to stop immediately, because the prince had permission from Siegfried. Finally, the butler revealed who he really is. His name is Soroyan, Duke Siegfried's eldest son. Later, someone is laughing hard about what happened. It's the butler's father, impressed by his son's cleverness. When he left their lands, he was just a little kid. It was a good decision. The boy is afraid the relationship between the duke and the king might get strained, but Siegfried is sure nothing will happen because the king won't ask any questions. He overthinks everything. If the prince got help from that family, he definitely won't be punished. There's a delicate balance of power there, so it'll all be ignored like it never happened. Whatever reason drove the young prince outside, Ellen noticed he was being followed, like he was about to get criticized. So he asked what the 3rd prince of Kairos was doing, chasing after him. Kalyan already knew that once you reach the 7th circle, aging slows down. The kid said it was late and asked if the mage was really leaving. The mage said when he tried to open that door, there was a huge barrier. That irritated Kalyan a little, because the mage didn't even seem that interested in staying. Kalyan said he tried the wrong door because there was already a place open for him. The mage realized he was being called out, and instead of listening to excuses, he saw he was dealing with a very sharp prince, someone who doesn't seem like he's only 14. That's when the mage noticed something. He stepped closer, genuinely worried. The moment he touched the prince's hands, energy started to rise, making the prince feel a sharp pain in his chest. The mage's mana flowed through the prince's body. The contact got so intense that Kalyan had to pull away. The mage said that even with doors shut, you can't completely block the wind. The kid's condition had been exposed to this master. Kalyan said there's a limit to how much mana he can use, but that isn't his real problem. The question is whether the mage has already figured it out. Ellen kept looking at him with interest. Even though they're dragon descendants, Kairos looks down on mages, and Ellen's presence had been completely ignored. But now he believes fate brought him to this boy, so he asked why the prince wanted to meet him. Kalyan knows he can't lie now or he'll be found out. Very politely, he said he wanted to talk because he believes his life will be in danger soon. The 3rd prince is hated by everyone. His existence is surrounded by enemies. Ellen put a barrier around the two of them that blocked all sound, and he did it without any chant at all. Thinking it over, the mage asked what the boy's goal really is to avoid what's coming, or to get rid of the real problem. Callian said the priority is stopping something worse from happening, for now, and if he has to take the throne to get what he wants, he'll do it. Ellen seemed to like that confidence. A young prince who needs a mentor to reach his goals, that's genuinely interesting. That's why the mage asked to be invited again. The prince knelt in front of him, introducing himself to his new mentor. With the mage's ego properly stroked, he agreed to save the prince. Back with the butler, he asked his father if nobody knows about his real identity, because it would be a problem if it leaked. Siegfried is very confident, but his son stays worried. He wanted to know how Leah has been lately. His father said she's doing great, handling the family's internal affairs, the position the boy abandoned. Whenever he wants to stop playing at being a butler, he can come back anytime. Realizing he won't see his son for a long time, the Duke listened as the boy said they'll see each other again in 3 months. Siegfried took that as his son leaving his current post. The boy said that soon a young master will turn 15. His father asked if he knows what their surname means. They're known as the Elephants of Kairos. They never wanted the throne, but they're extremely powerful. They're the kings of beasts and nobody can lay a hand on them. After saying that, Siegfried started smiling, saying their name carries real power. Then he told his son to do whatever he wanted, which made the boy genuinely happy. He said next time, he shouldn't make him worry so much. The butler fixed his clothes to return, very formal. He said goodbye to his father, saying they'd see each other soon. Siegfried thought his son was stubborn. Typical of the family, he was also thinking about what the prince did earlier. If he can pull something like that off, he must have grown a lot. Now the Duke wants to know what the third prince is planning. The next day, a carriage caught everyone's attention. It had an emblem with 7 roses and a silver staff. People wanted to know why that family was visiting Kairos, but the reason seemed obvious. They have a good relationship with the king, and rumors were spreading. Ellen had just stepped down from the carriage. His young disciple had made it happen. The night before, they talked about exactly this. The mage needed to arrive at 9 o'clock. Competing with the Brizan family's influence won't be easy. It's time to shake up the nobles. The servants of that house welcomed the mage politely and said the king was already waiting. In the meeting, the king was surprised by the mage's presence, and Ellen asked for a place to stay. To compete with his wife's power, the king knows having that mage on his side would be very useful. It's surprising he showed up there first, and it made the king suspicious. The mage said that the night before he found a small black cat with red eyes. He realized it was very smart and decided to teach it a few things, but he still didn't have anywhere to stay. The king asked what he was going to teach, and the answer couldn't be more obvious: magic. But the environment also needs to help that little cat improve, so the owner of those lands needs to contribute too. A bit uneasy, the king asked if the mage can really do that. Callium will be his disciple. Nobody can stop it. The king decided to cooperate. That place is already a mess. One more thing won't make it worse. Still, the king was intrigued, because he heard the third son had nothing special about him. That surprised the mage. Even the boy's health condition is unusual, because it's hard to find the cause. To make it worse, the king only talks about things he's heard, like he doesn't even know his own son. So the mage asked if the father knows the young prince's height, something basic. From the king's silence, the mage immediately realized he couldn't answer. Then he told him attention can be poison, and indifference can be medicine. But in this case, saying you're busy is just an excuse. The king got irritated but decided to let it go, since the mage still doesn't know how to behave as the boy's mentor. He said it's ridiculous to have to explain this, but he cares a lot about the young prince, insisting he's exceptionally special. Just as their conversation was about to be interrupted, a magical barrier was summoned. Ellen told the king to pay attention. The boy looked sick. Even the clothes he put on had been urgently altered, since he'd lost weight. He can barely get himself up when he wakes. If the king keeps doing nothing but watch, he's going to lose that something he claims is so precious. It's almost lunchtime, and the young prince still hasn't left his room to eat breakfast. The butler said he'd handle it for him and bring some tea. Our protagonist stays in bed in a lot of pain even while he's asleep. Watching that, the butler figured the day before must have been exhausting. That's when the mage showed up and saw the boy still hadn't woken up. The mage's presence threw the butler off. But then he was completely terrified when Ellen appeared out of nowhere. Siegfried Jr. tried to stop the mage from getting closer. He told him to give our protagonist some time because his health was fragile. But the mage recognized that boy right away. They'd met a few years earlier, and he knew he was looking at the baby elephant. Looks like some people know who the butler's father is. The butler swore his disguise was perfect, but he still got found out. Our protagonist finally woke up, but he had no idea how many hours he'd been resting. He was told he had a visitor. Callian saw who the mage was, and the boy received a small gift from him, some pills he had to take every day. Ellen said the boy was dealing with 2 problems. The first was that he couldn't control his own mana. The second was that his body was losing weight way too fast. Callian was impressed by his teacher's ability to notice things. Ellen asked if the boy really had the power of the blessing. Callian said yes, because of it, he should recover faster and have an affinity for magic. But somehow his regeneration seemed messed up. More and more intrigued, Ellen asked if the boy had never found that strange. With healing mixed with magical power, In theory, the boy's heart should be strong. His teacher agreed. The blessing hadn't disappeared, and his heart didn't have any issues either. Actually, his regeneration was being used constantly, just somewhere else. That statement completely shocked our protagonist. He immediately realized he was being poisoned, and if it weren't for his blessing, he would have been dead a long time ago. Fighting a poison that strong was pushing his body to its limit. Because of that, using mana was extremely difficult. Our protagonist knows that, originally, that boy was the victim of a murder, but he'd already been getting poisoned. Something extremely well planned. Knowing all of this fills him with rage. Ellen noticed the negative intent coming off him. A 14-year-old shouldn't be capable of that. Callian believed that little pill was the antidote. His teacher said he'd made it in a hurry, but it should be enough. Our protagonist started thinking about what would happen if he took it while still taking in the poison. That worried his teacher, because then the treatment wouldn't work as well. Keeping the poison in his system would be very dangerous. But the boy already had an idea who the culprit was. It had to be the tea he drank every morning. Since he drank it in front of everyone, it would be easy to confirm he'd ingested it. Maybe the boy discovered that in his past life, and that's what sped up his assassination. Things are very different now. Callian needs to find out what's going on while keeping everything secret. His teacher asked if that was the only option. The boy needed to confirm the tea was the source of the poison. That could put his servants in danger, because the culprit does it regularly. Confident they'll never be caught. Knowing the butler's real identity, the teacher said he'd be safe, but he understood Callian's fear and wanted to know what the next steps would be, somewhere mysterious. A disgusting old man said that to use his trump card he needed to receive something. The next day, Callian wanted his teacher to accompany him outside. Some servants went to find Prince Planche, because the queen wanted to see him. She said the boy was very late, but he didn't seem to care at all. Drunk again, the young man drank some water and told his mother to just say what she came to say and leave. The queen had heard our protagonist had gotten a mentor, Ellen the 7th Circle Mage. That news was spreading among the nobles. Planche couldn't care less. The queen told him he had to appreciate the investment she'd made. It was time to get ready. A lot of eyes would be watching the heir from now on, so he'd better not disappoint them. Planche got furious and threw a cup at the floor. Even though he hurt himself, he kicked the servants out. Now he was more and more irritated with our boy, the source of his frustration. Because of the king's birthday celebration, the royal party was touring the capital, and his children were traveling with him too, making the people extremely excited. Callian was the one the crowd most wanted to see. The butler asked if he was feeling okay. At least his face looked a bit healthier. Callian said he'd been resting well. Thanks to the antidote he was taking, breathing was much easier, and the pain in his heart was gone. Unfortunately, the schedule that day would be long, which made the butler very worried. Still, the protagonist was healthy enough to see his subjects. In the middle of the crowd, a man tried to hide. Our protagonist noticed those mysterious figures. He would never forget them. They were people from his past life. That knight who sacrificed himself to protect him, Curie. But a hooded man disappeared into the crowd. Our protagonist tried to follow on horseback, but the butler stopped him. Callian tried to explain that he needed to go after them, but they were already gone, and it would look terrible to abandon the caravan at that moment. One thing he was sure of, he would meet his friend again. At the end of the route, a noble welcomed the king and his family. He said he'd prepared a performance to celebrate their arrival, Baron Melfier, the one responsible for organizing this outing and all the stress our boy had felt. In his past life, a horseback outing was organized by that baron, and one of the king's sons got hurt, which led to Melfier being hanged. It's a shame because he seems like a pretty polite background character. The hall was already prepared to receive the guests. Our boy had already spotted the chandelier that was going to fall. For an event held for the king himself, it was weird that the knights hadn't checked the safety. But thinking about the commander, Callian realized he shouldn't expect much from them. He decided he'd give that background character a chance to live. When the baron approached him, Callian said he was worried about that chandelier and ordered it to be inspected. Obviously, that message left the noble totally confused. The horse performance was happening in the arena. The noble was like a kid, sitting beside the king. He didn't want to miss this chance for anything. But then he noticed our protagonist's expression and started thinking he really should have checked the ceiling. When he inspected the place, the baron found a badly worn rope. If it weren't for the young prince's warning, something terrible could have happened. But he'd been warned about what was going to happen, like our protagonist knew the future. Callian noticed the noble acted very wisely. The question was why. Bryson had guards in that area enough to cause a huge commotion. That more alcoholic prince said the noble didn't know his place. The performance continued in the arena. Looking at our protagonist, the drunk prince said he was disgusted by his bloodline. Everyone there heard it, and it only made our protagonist more motivated, because he never thought the crazy king from his other life would turn out to be such a useless person. It was time to find out how far the queen would go in this situation. She didn't like what happened either, because she'd already warned her son not to be stupid. Only then, after looking at her own son, did she understand he'd done it on purpose. But that day was special. Many nobles were present. It was time to make a decision. The show for the nobles finally ended. The accident that should have happened was prevented. The queen stayed very quiet, like she hadn't planned anything at all. Maybe that accident really wasn't part of her conspiracy. That had been debated in his past life too. It could have been driven by outside forces. It seemed designed to be discovered, a direct attack on royalty. Brizen benefited the most from the fallout. As they left, our protagonist asked the butler where that baron's wealth came from. He learned the man had a diamond mine. If the baron was removed from the board, Brizen would thrive in that market too. Our protagonist was putting the pieces together, but he decided to watch a little longer. He thought about pressuring the baron a bit, since our boy had saved his life. So he told the butler to cancel all plans after the performance. He said the comments he'd heard from his own brother were intense, and he was shaken. That was why he wouldn't be able to take part in the rest of the schedule. The king was in his office, thinking about what happened. Since the mage had scolded him directly, he started remembering the boy's mother, her final moments, until servants interrupted, announcing the queen's arrival. One maid said she'd bring tea for them. The queen noticed someone had visited before she did. The king stopped the tea, saying the queen would be leaving soon. Getting straight to it, he asked what brought her there. She asked what would happen to Brizen after that event, but she was worried about her son's behavior. It could damage his place in the line of succession. She praised the day's festival and suggested the baron should be rewarded. The king realized she already had something in mind. Smiling, she brought up Brizen's exclusive right to supply horses to the royal family. To the king, she was giving up a very important asset, which only backed up what Ellen had said. Ellen said the queen wouldn't give up the royal guard over that, because she wasn't desperate, but she would hand over something valuable, and the king should act like he hadn't expected it. After hearing the proposal, the king said he would enter Planche in the next event. That made the queen deeply happy. That night, the king came to dinner accompanied by his son, to reward the baron for what he'd done that day. The nobles already knew that was the deal between the king and the queen, because of Planche's actions. Because the protagonist's fame was growing, his room got flooded with gifts. His rival's influence was shrinking, but he didn't need that kind of offer except for the baron's gifts. He would donate everything. It didn't take long for the butler to find the baron's gifts, a very flashy necklace made with red stones. It was so big it looked like it was made for a horse. That confused our boy, and he learned that when the baron approached, the butler had said our boy liked the black horse. That's why he received the necklace. It had to be the baron testing his intentions. If he accepted this gift, he'd get another one later. Talion thought the man didn't understand the value of his own life. Those jewels weren't enough, so he decided to send a message. He wanted to know the value of the necklace because he was going to buy it. The butler didn't understand the offer, and our boy said he wasn't fascinated by it. Actually, a very sinister plant had caught his attention. It was a gift from the Mages Association, and our boy found that really strange. But it had to be valuable because it came with an explanatory letter. When the plant dies, it releases its pollen. Our boy seemed to understand why it mattered. He said the gift would stay in his room because he had a very interesting idea he wanted to try. Later, he deliberately spilled the tea and pretended he'd burned his hand. The butler asked some maids to clean it up. Some of the tea spilled onto the plant. That made the butler worry the plant might be affected by the tea. The protagonist said it was fine. It's not like the tea was poisoned. Way too specific of a comment, and it scared the maid. With his teacher beside him, our boy thanked him for the help he'd been getting. Thanks to the antidote's effect, Ellen noticed our protagonist looked much healthier and much happier. Ellen also wanted to take a walk like that. It was the first time in a long while. Callian asked if the king had allowed it, but the king probably didn't even know what was going on, since he was always busy. Our boy hurried out, leaving behind a very worried butler. The mage asked if he was still taking the medicine. Callian promised he was doing exactly what he'd been told. The person delivering the poison was very worried. Since the plant had been used as bait, that surprised the mage because it was an interesting strategy. The gift our boy received had been used brilliantly. Now they needed to split up again, since the protagonist wanted to do this alone. The Mages Association was on a nearby street. That's where the teacher would be ready to help him. Soon they'd meet again, once they did what needed to be done. Some blacksmiths were working hard. Our boy got a dagger to defend himself. It would be useful from now on if he was attacked. What he needed now was more information. In his past life, several agents were sent into the field for that purpose. Trained assassins got missions like that, assigned through the king of Secretia. In his past life, our protagonist did the same thing. On that dark street, he was completely unprotected, and he knew the assassins from his kingdom were very capable. Some drunk men were approaching him. He had to be careful not to reveal his true identity, otherwise he could trigger an attack sooner than expected. The truth was, his exotic appearance appealed to him, so he had to be even more cautious. He finally entered a very peculiar shop, much bigger than he expected. Inside, the seller asked if the boy was looking for a carrier pigeon, but he said he didn't need those birds, which looked like they were sleeping peacefully. It even seemed like they'd come from far away and were exhausted, and there was no better place for them than that shop. More and more intrigued, the old man asked what brought the young man there. Collian said he needed to feed his birds. In the blink of an eye, he was attacked. The blade passed close to his hood, and the old man said he hadn't sold birds recently, so he was very careful and suspicious. Collian quickly realized that wasn't an ordinary old man. It would be hard to fight him in that situation, so our boy decided to talk instead. He said the birds he was looking for had left a nest far away, so they needed food. They hadn't been sold. Birds was a code name for secret agents responsible for gathering information. Not even Secretary's agents knew everyone out in the field, so information wouldn't leak. The old man asked if the boy was someone's bird. Kalyan even considered using his former father's name to pretend he was a working bird, claiming he was there on Nebulade's behalf. That left the old man very surprised. Everything was going well so far. Our boy asked for a bit of food, because this bird needs to work. The old man immediately told him to follow. He led our boy into a secret room and said the young man must be a new recruit, and that he should remember the old man's codename, White Eagle. Our protagonist said he was Red Swan. It was time for him to get the information. For each piece of information, he had to hand over an item, payment up front. Our boy didn't expect to be charged before even saying what he was looking for. It could be a trap. But the old man said the price was fixed. After paying, he got the information he wanted. Looking over that scroll, Red Swan started wondering if it was really correct, but based on what he'd asked for, that was what the old man had to give him. Before leaving the shop, he was warned to be careful, because that place is pretty cruel. Our protagonist agreed, thinking that nothing there was more dangerous than White Eagle himself. On the way back to the castle, our boy saw several hooded men. He needed to cross that bridge, but he was stopped. He asked what it meant. One of the men apologized and said he had to wait because the dead were making their final journey. Only then did he realize it was a funeral ritual. Our boy got off his horse to show respect. Funeral customs are very different in that nation. They place red flowers into the river so the dead won't lose their way. In his past life, they did it with white flowers placed on the grave. They bloomed at night, a sign that the dead would never meet the living. Our boy started thinking about it, whether in his past life anyone had mourned him or whether time rewound before that happened. Maybe he was the dead person who'd lost his own way. Someone thanked him for stopping out of respect. Now he could continue. Back on his horse, he pulled the hood away from his face and said he would say a prayer for that soul. And the man who had stopped him noticed his face. That man's companions saw he was distracted and asked why. Arkson said he would remember the Prince of Secretia very well because that's what happened in his past life. Answering his companions, he said the young man seemed like a kind person. On his way, Kalyan saw several signs with the name Sisphanian and thought it was a bit over the top, especially since the last one looked like a bar. The stories from his past life about that city were true, about the followers of Sisphanian. A bald man was going to take our boy somewhere more private, but Kalyan said that wasn't where he wanted to go. He wanted the 4th floor of that building. The bald man was immediately surprised and quickly offered to show him the way. Kalyan was now in an empty hall. He saw a small object hanging on the wall. When he was with White Eagle, he'd asked for just one piece of information, where illegal business happens in Kairos. After he triggered that strange object, a secret door opened in the wall. There was a staircase leading underground where our boy would gather more information. Some people were gambling down there, but that wasn't what he was looking for. Deeper inside, the illegal fights took place. People cheered intensely for their favorite fighters. The first match ended. The winner was Stoneface. While the loser's body was dragged away, the bets were paid out. The smell of blood filled the place. That was where ordinary people threw away their humanity for the sake of brutality. To our boy, it was disgusting and pathetic. He was approached to pay the entry fee. At that moment, Kalyan noticed a silver-haired girl. It looked like she was mute, and she was trying to guide him to where he should go next. He noticed the tips of her ears had been cut, and she didn't look comfortable in those clothes. Around the necks of those girls was a tracking device so they couldn't escape. The mute girl gestured again, pointing to the number 27. It seemed like she wanted him to place a bet now, so he blended in with the crowd until he could get what he came for. The rule there was simple. If you win your bet, you get money fast. Our boy made a small fortune. Some men started talking about it. It was time for a special fight against an undefeated fighter. So far, his opponent was a rookie. This was the person Kalyan wanted to find. The one who in his past life said he'd been trapped in a place where he had to fight to survive until his sister died. The Night Curie. But right now, he was still a slave.